There's a certain type of man that companies fight to keep, that friend groups quietly build their plans around, that families lean on when everything else falls apart. And here's the wild part. He's usually not the loudest guy in the room. He's not the one cracking jokes for attention or posting his whole life online for validation. He's the guy who shows up on time every single time, does the work nobody sees, keeps his word without being reminded, and somehow, without ever campaigning for it, becomes the one person everybody secretly knows they can't function without. That's not an accident, and it's definitely not luck. That's a system. A cold, calculated 500-year-old system, straight out of the mind of Niccolò Machiavelli, the guy who understood power better than almost anybody who's ever lived. Today, we're breaking down exactly how to build that same quiet, disciplined, impossible-to-replace energy in your own life, piece by piece. No fluff, no fake motivational nonsense, just the real blueprint. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to look at quiet completely differently. No cap, once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. No cap, once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. So buckle up, because we're about to break this whole thing down, piece by piece. Let's get into it. Welcome back to The Hidden Mind, the channel built for people who want the real playbook on power, discipline, and psychology, not the watered-down, feel-good version everybody else is putting out. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is exactly the kind of content we drop week after week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. If you're already riding with us, you know the routine. Smash that like button before you keep watching, drop a comment, and let us know where you're watching from and what you're working on right now. Share this with somebody in your circle who needs to hear this today, and if this channel's been adding real value to your life, drop a super thanks below to help us keep this content coming. One more thing before we dive in. I want you to actually picture somebody specific while you watch this, not some abstract idea of discipline floating around in your head. Picture the calmest, most solid person you personally know. The one who never seems rattled, who other people quietly go to for advice, who somehow always seems to have their stuff together without ever bragging about it. Odds are, that person didn't get that way overnight. And odds are, that person isn't naturally more gifted than you. They just figured out this exact system a lot earlier than most people do. By the time this video's done, you're going to know exactly what they figured out. Alright, let's talk about why quiet, disciplined men have quietly been running the show since the beginning of time. Part 1. Why quiet is the ultimate power move. Let's kill a myth right out the gate. Quiet does not mean weak, and disciplined does not mean boring. That's a lie society sold you to keep you chasing attention instead of building actual substance. Machiavelli understood something most people still haven't figured out even today. Power isn't about how much noise you make, it's about how much control you have over information, timing, and perception. A loud man broadcasts everything: his plans, his frustrations, his insecurities, his next move. It's all right there on the surface for anybody paying attention to read like a book. And guess what happens to open books? They get used. They get predicted. They get outmaneuvered by people who took the time to actually study them, because they never had to guess. The loud guy told them everything for free. Now flip that. A quiet man is a locked vault. Nobody knows exactly what he's thinking, what he's planning, or what he's capable of, and that uncertainty creates something incredibly valuable: respect, built on mystery instead of noise. Think about the most respected, most quietly powerful person you know in real life. I guarantee you, they're not the one talking the most at the dinner table. They're the one everybody glances at when a real decision needs to be made, because their silence has weight to it. That weight isn't given, it's built, one closed mouth and one solid result at a time. Here's the practical part. Start paying attention to how much you're talking versus how much you're actually doing. If your mouth is writing checks, your actions haven't cashed yet, you're leaking power every single time you open it. Flip the ratio. Talk less about what you're going to do and let your results do the talking after the fact. That single shift alone will change how people perceive you faster than almost anything else on this list. Because in a world full of people talking a big game, the guy who just quietly delivers becomes impossible to ignore. Let's make this real for a second, because it's easy to nod along to an idea like this without actually picturing it. Think about two guys starting the exact same job on the exact same day. Guy number one spends his first few weeks talking about all his big ideas, name-dropping his old accomplishments, making sure everybody in the office knows he's got plans to move up fast. Guy number two barely says a word. He shows up early, stays a little late, asks smart questions in private instead of trying to look smart in front of the group, and just quietly gets really good at his job. Fast forward a year, and it's almost never the loud guy who gets the promotion, the trust, the keys to something bigger. It's the quiet one, because the loud guy already told everybody what to expect from him, and expectations that big are almost impossible to actually live up to. The quiet guy, on the other hand, kept exceeding expectations nobody even knew he had, and that kind of surprise builds a completely different level of trust. That's not a coincidence. That's exactly the dynamic Machiavelli was describing when he talked about the danger of revealing too much too soon. You want people constantly, slightly surprised by how capable you turn out to be, not constantly comparing you against promises you made with your mouth before you'd proven anything with your actions. Part 2. Build the discipline nobody sees. Here's something Machiavelli lived out in his own life that doesn't get talked about enough. Real strength isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the boring, unseen, repetitive moments nobody's clapping for. The guy who wakes up at the same time every single day, whether he feels like it or not. The guy who trains, studies, or works on his craft even when there's no audience watching and no immediate reward waiting for him. The guy who keeps his word to himself just as seriously as he keeps his word to other people. That's where real discipline actually gets forged, and it's exactly why so few people ever develop it. Because there's no applause for showing up on a random Tuesday when nobody's watching and nothing exciting is happening. Discipline isn't glamorous, and that's exactly the point. It's not supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be reliable. Think about the difference between motivation and discipline for a second, because a lot of guys get this confused. Motivation is an emotion. It shows up when it feels like it and disappears the second things get hard or boring. Discipline is a system. It doesn't care how you feel, it just executes the plan regardless. The quiet, disciplined man doesn't wait to feel inspired before he does the work. He built a structure that runs whether inspiration shows up or not, and that structure is exactly what separates men who talk about change from men who actually become somebody different. Here's a real, practical way to start building this immediately. Pick one thing, just one, that you'll do every single day, no matter what. No exceptions, no excuses. Doesn't have to be huge. Could be 20 minutes of reading, could be a workout, could be working on a skill you're trying to master. The size of the habit matters less than the consistency of showing up for it, because what you're actually training isn't the skill itself. You're training your own self-trust. Every single day you keep that promise to yourself, you're proving to your own mind that your word actually means something, and that internal trust is the foundation every single dangerous, disciplined man is built on top of. Here's something that really separates the men who talk about discipline from the ones who actually live it. Accountability without an audience. Anybody can stay consistent when people are watching, when there's a coach yelling at them, when there's a deadline breathing down their neck. The real test happens on the random Sunday morning, when nobody would know if you skipped it, when there's no boss checking in, no friend keeping score, just you and the choice of whether to show up for yourself or not. Machiavelli understood that a leader who can't govern himself has no business trying to govern anything else, and that principle scales down perfectly into everyday life. If you can't keep a promise to yourself when nobody's checking, How exactly are you going to keep it when the stakes get higher and more people are counting on you? This is why discipline built quietly, without an audience, hits different than discipline performed for likes and validation. It's not about proving anything to anybody else. It's about becoming the type of man whose word, even the word he only gives himself in the privacy of his own head, is completely solid. That's the real foundation everything else on this list gets built on top of. And it's also exactly why so few people ever actually get there, because it's genuinely uncomfortable to hold yourself accountable when literally nobody else would ever know if you didn't. Part 3. Master your craft in silence. One of Machiavelli's coldest observations was this: a ruler who wants to hold on to power long-term has to actually become excellent at what he does, not just appear excellent through image and talk. Competence, real competence, is the one thing that can't be faked long-term, and it's also the one thing that makes a man genuinely impossible to replace. Think about your own job, your own field, your own craft, whatever it is. There are guys who are good at talking about their skills in interviews and meetings, and then there are guys who are just quietly, undeniably good at the actual work. 9 times out of 10, when push comes to shove, it's the second guy who keeps his seat when everybody else gets cut. Because talent that's proven under pressure beats talent that's only proven in conversation every single time. This is where quiet, disciplined men have a massive built-in advantage that loud guys usually miss out on. While other people are spending their energy managing their image, chasing recognition, and making sure everybody knows how good they are, the quiet man is spending that same energy actually getting better. He's studying while others are posting. He's practicing while others are performing. He's refining his actual skill set while other people are refining their personal brand. And here's the thing about skill: it doesn't need an announcement. It shows up on its own, in the quality of the work, in the results that speak louder than any resume or social media post ever could. If you want to become genuinely impossible to replace, stop asking how you can get more recognition for what you already know, and start asking what skill, if you mastered it completely, would make people unable to function without you. Then go build that skill in silence, without narrating every step of the process to everybody around you. Let the mastery announce itself when the moment actually calls for it. Think about any craftsman, any true expert you genuinely respect in whatever field you're into. A mechanic who can diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it. A chef who can taste a dish and instantly know it's missing something specific. An old-school carpenter who eyeballs a cut and gets it exactly right without measuring twice. None of that mastery happened because they were chasing attention. It happened because they put in thousands of quiet, repetitive hours nobody else witnessed, refining something most people never had the patience to sit with that long. That's the model. Real mastery is almost always built away from the spotlight, in the unglamorous, repetitive grind that doesn't photograph well and doesn't make for an exciting highlight reel. If you're serious about becoming impossible to replace, stop looking for the version of skill building that looks impressive on camera, and start putting in the version that actually works. The boring reps, the unnoticed hours, the quiet refinement that eventually turns into something nobody else in the room can match. That gap between you and everybody else doesn't get built in a weekend. It gets built in the thousands of small, silent hours most people aren't willing to put in, which is exactly why it becomes so valuable once it's actually there. Part 4. Make your results do the talking. Here's a hard truth that most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. In most situations, actions genuinely do speak louder than words, but only if those actions are consistent enough to actually build a reputation over time. One good result doesn't make you impossible to replace. A pattern does. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the idea that a leader is judged far more by outcomes than by intentions. And honestly, that's just as true in everyday life as it was in political warfare 500 years ago. Nobody remembers the guy who talked about starting a business for 3 years straight. Everybody remembers the guy who quietly built one and then, out of nowhere, showed up successful. That's the exact energy you want to cultivate. Instead of explaining your goals to everybody around you before you've made any real progress, redirect all of that explaining energy into actual execution. Every time you catch yourself wanting to tell somebody about a plan you haven't started yet, use that urge as fuel to go work on the plan instead. This does 2 things simultaneously. It protects your idea from getting picked apart or discouraged before it's even had a chance to grow, and it builds a track record where your word and your results are perfectly aligned, which is exactly what makes people trust you on a level most people never earn. When you become known as someone whose results consistently match or exceed what you quietly set out to do, people stop needing you to explain yourself at all. They just trust the process because they've watched the pattern play out enough times to believe in it without question. That trust is worth more than any amount of talking ever could be, and it's built exclusively through repetition, not persuasion. There's also a sneaky benefit to letting your results do the talking that most people don't think about. It protects you from the exhausting cycle of constantly having to defend or justify yourself. Think about how much energy gets wasted explaining your worth to people, arguing your case, trying to convince somebody who's already made up their mind about you. A track record eliminates almost all of that. When your results are consistent and undeniable, you stop needing to convince anybody of anything, because the evidence is just sitting right there, speaking for itself. That's a massive weight off your shoulders that loud, all-talk guys never get to put down, because they're constantly having to back up their words with more words, in an endless loop that never actually resolves into real trust. The quiet man who lets his work speak steps completely outside of that exhausting loop. He doesn't have to sell himself in every conversation because his reputation is already doing that job for him in rooms he's not even standing in. There's also something worth mentioning here about how this plays out over time in professional settings specifically, because it's one of the clearest, most measurable examples of this entire principle in action. Think about layoffs, restructurings, budget cuts, the moments when companies are forced to make hard decisions about who stays and who goes. In those moments, titles, seniority, and even likability often matter less than one simple question decision-makers keep asking themselves: who is actually going to be hard to function without if we let them go? That question is answered almost entirely by pattern and reputation built up over months and years, not by a single good week or a convincing conversation in the moment. The quiet, disciplined person who's been solving real problems consistently has already answered that question in their favor long before the hard decision ever needs to be made, simply because the evidence has been piling up the whole time, whether anybody was consciously tracking it or not. Part 5. Become the person they can't function without. Let's get real practical here, because impossible to replace isn't just some catchy phrase. It's an actual strategic position you can build on purpose. Machiavelli talked constantly about the importance of making yourself necessary to the people and structures around you, because necessity creates a kind of security that popularity never can. Popularity is fragile. It depends on people's moods, trends, and temporary feelings toward you. Necessity is solid. It depends on the actual value you provide, and value doesn't evaporate the way popularity does. So how do you actually build this in real life? You start by identifying the gaps nobody else wants to fill. Every workplace, every friend group, every team has problems sitting there that everybody complains about, but nobody actually steps up to solve, because solving them requires effort most people aren't willing to put in. The quiet, disciplined man looks at those gaps differently. He sees opportunity where everybody else sees inconvenience. He becomes the guy who handles the problem nobody else wanted to touch, quietly, without complaining about it or making a big show out of solving it. Do that enough times, in enough situations, and something interesting starts happening. people start automatically routing problems your way, not because you asked for it, but because you've proven, over and over, that you're the one who actually gets things handled. That reputation is worth more than any title, because titles can be taken away, but a reputation for being genuinely reliable and capable follows you everywhere you go. That's real, portable power, and it's built one quiet, solved problem at a time, not through announcements or self-promotion. Here's a quick gut check you can run on your own life right now. Think about your workplace, your friend group, your family. If you disappeared tomorrow, what would actually fall apart? Not what would people miss emotionally, but what would functionally stop working without you there to handle it? If the honest answer is not much, that's not an insult. That's just information. It tells you exactly where to start building. Find the gap. Find the thing nobody else wants to own, the recurring problem everybody complains about but nobody fixes, and quietly become the person who handles it without being asked twice. Do that consistently, and you'll notice something happen naturally over time. People stop thinking of you as replaceable, because in their mind, replacing you doesn't just mean finding somebody with similar skills, it means finding somebody willing to actually own that responsibility the way you did, and that combination is a lot rarer than raw skill alone. Part 6. Master your emotions to protect your discipline. Discipline and emotional control are basically two sides of the same coin, and Machiavelli understood this better than almost any strategist in history. A man who's constantly ruled by his emotions, quick to anger, quick to panic, quick to abandon his plans the second things get uncomfortable, cannot maintain discipline long term, because discipline requires consistency, and raw emotion is the least consistent force there is. Think about how many good habits and solid plans get abandoned the second somebody's having a bad day, or the second an emotional setback shows up. That's not a discipline problem on the surface, that's an emotional regulation problem underneath it. The quiet, disciplined man trains himself to separate what he feels from what he does. He might feel frustrated, discouraged, or even furious in a given moment, but he doesn't let that temporary emotional state override the long-term system he's built for himself. This is exactly why composed, emotionally controlled people tend to be the ones who actually finish what they start, while emotionally reactive people tend to bounce between 100 different half-finished plans depending on their mood that week. Here's a simple but powerful practice to build this. Whenever a strong emotion hits, especially a negative one, try to name it internally before reacting to it, just labeling it. This is frustration, this is disappointment, this is anger. Creates a small but crucial gap between the feeling and the reaction, and that gap is exactly where discipline lives. The goal isn't to stop feeling things, it's to stop letting every single feeling dictate your actions, because a man who's ruled by his emotions is, whether he realizes it or not, being controlled by whatever situation triggered that emotion in the first place. And that's the opposite of the calm, self-directed power we're building here. There's a specific moment that tests this more than anything else: getting disrespected or criticized in front of other people. That's usually when discipline falls apart fastest, because the emotional urge to defend yourself, snap back, or shut down completely is intense in that exact moment. The quiet, disciplined man trains himself to handle that moment differently. He doesn't ignore the disrespect and pretend it didn't happen, and he doesn't explode and give away his composure either. He absorbs it, stays level, and responds, if he responds at all, from a place of control instead of wounded pride. That single skill alone, staying composed under public pressure, does more for your reputation than almost anything else you can practice, because everybody in that room remembers exactly how you handled it, and that memory shapes how much they respect you going forward, far more than the original disrespect ever did. Part 7. Play the long game while everyone else chases shortcuts. We're living in a culture completely obsessed with instant results, and honestly, That obsession is exactly why so few people ever actually build anything that lasts. Machiavelli studied leaders across generations and noticed a consistent pattern. The ones chasing quick wins and shortcuts almost always collapsed eventually, while the ones playing a longer, more patient game ended up holding real, lasting power. This applies directly to becoming quiet, disciplined, and impossible to replace, because none of that happens overnight, and anybody trying to rush it is going to end up with a shallow, fragile version of it that falls apart the first time real pressure shows up. Real discipline compounds. The habits you build today might feel almost pointless in the moment, but stacked over months and years, they become the entire foundation of who you are and what you're capable of. This is exactly why the quiet man tends to win in the long run, while other people are burning out chasing overnight success and jumping from one shiny shortcut to the next. He's steadily, patiently building something real underneath the surface, brick by brick, day by day, without needing constant recognition along the way. Here's the mindset shift that makes this sustainable. Stop measuring your progress against other people's highlight reels and start measuring it against who you were last month, last year, 5 years ago. That comparison is the only one that actually matters, because it's the only one that reflects your real, personal trajectory instead of some curated version of somebody else's journey that you're not even seeing the full picture of anyway. And here's the payoff that makes the long game worth it. Compound growth doesn't just apply to money, it applies to reputation, skill, and discipline too. The guy who's been quietly showing up, quietly improving, quietly building trust for 3 straight years isn't just 3 years ahead of somebody who started yesterday. He's exponentially ahead because every quiet win he stacked made the next one easier, faster, and more natural. Meanwhile, the guy chasing shortcuts is still starting over every few months, because shortcuts don't compound, they just reset. That's the real, unglamorous secret behind almost every quietly successful person you've ever admired. It was never one big dramatic breakthrough. It was years of boring, consistent, unseen effort finally showing its work all at once, making it look sudden to everybody who wasn't paying attention the whole time. Part 8. The final transformation, from overlooked to indispensable. Let's bring everything together, because all 7 of these principles build directly on top of each other into one complete system. It starts with silence, talking less, revealing less, letting your results carry the weight instead of your words. That silence creates space for real discipline to grow, the kind that shows up consistently whether anybody's watching or not. That discipline becomes the foundation for genuine mastery, because skills built through consistent, quiet effort become undeniable in a way that talk never could be. That mastery produces real, tangible results, and those results, repeated consistently over time, build a reputation that speaks for itself without you ever needing to defend or explain it. That reputation makes you necessary, not just liked, and necessity is what actually protects your position when things get difficult or competitive. Underneath all of it, emotional control keeps the entire system stable, making sure temporary setbacks or bad days don't knock the whole structure down. And patience, running through every single piece of this, makes sure you don't rush the process and end up with something shallow instead of something real. Put all of that together, and you've got a man who started out completely overlooked, maybe even underestimated by people who mistook his quiet nature for a lack of ambition, and ends up becoming somebody people genuinely cannot imagine functioning without. That transformation doesn't happen through one dramatic moment. It happens through hundreds of small, quiet, disciplined choices that nobody else was paying attention to, which is exactly why, when it finally shows up in full force, it hits everybody around you like they never saw it coming, even though, in reality, you were building it the entire time. Part 9. Protect the transformation once you've built it. Here's something nobody warns you about, when you actually start becoming this version of yourself. The moment you start showing real discipline, real quiet strength, real competence, not everybody around you is going to celebrate it. That might sound backwards, but think about it from their side for a second. When you were loud, scattered, easy to read, and not particularly threatening, you fit neatly into the role everybody assigned you. The second you start leveling up, quietly getting sharper, more composed, more capable, you disrupt the picture people had of you. And disruption makes some people uncomfortable, even when it's positive. Machiavelli understood this dynamic extremely well. He knew that change, even good change, creates friction, because it forces everybody around the changing person to reconsider their own position relative to him. Some friends might start acting a little distant. Some family members might suddenly have opinions about how you're different now. Some coworkers might get a little cold once they realize you're not staying in the lane they assumed you'd stay in forever. This is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's actually one of the clearest signs you're doing something right, because real growth almost always ruffles a few feathers along the way. The mistake most guys make right here, at this exact stage, is shrinking back down to make everybody comfortable again, abandoning the very discipline and quiet strength that was starting to set them apart. Don't do that. Protect what you've built. You don't owe anybody an apology for becoming more disciplined, more composed, more capable, and more valuable than you used to be. Stay respectful, stay grounded, don't rub it in anybody's face. But do not shrink yourself back down just because your growth made somebody else feel a certain type of way about their own stagnant situation. The quiet, disciplined, impossible to replace version of you isn't a phase, it's who you're becoming, and it deserves to be protected, especially in the moments when it would be easier to just fold back into who you used to be. Part 10. The historical proof, why this strategy has always worked. If any of this feels too theoretical, let's ground it in something real, because Machiavelli didn't pull these ideas out of thin air. He studied actual rulers, actual power struggles, actual rises and falls, and pulled the patterns out of what he observed. Time and time again throughout history, the leaders who lasted, the ones who held real power for decades instead of flaming out in a year or two, were rarely the flashiest or the loudest. They were the ones who understood timing, who kept their real intentions close to the chest, who built quiet networks of loyalty through consistent, reliable behavior instead of empty promises and grand gestures. Meanwhile, the leaders who ruled through noise, spectacle, and constant self-promotion tended to burn out fast, because that kind of power depends entirely on maintaining momentum and attention is exhausting to sustain and impossible to fully control. The second the spotlight moved somewhere else, or the second people got bored of the performance, that kind of power collapsed almost overnight, because there was nothing solid actually holding it up underneath all the noise. This exact same pattern plays out today in business, in relationships, in careers, in every single arena where influence and trust actually matter. The flashy startup that burns bright and crashes because it was built on hype instead of a real product. The relationship that looked exciting on the surface but fell apart because there was no real discipline or consistency underneath the chemistry. The coworker who talked a big game in every meeting but got quietly passed over for promotion because the actual work never matched the talk. History repeats this lesson over and over because human nature hasn't fundamentally changed. We still trust consistency over charisma once the stakes get real. We still respect quiet competence more than loud promises once results actually matter. And we still gravitate, eventually, toward the people who prove themselves reliable over time, instead of the ones who just made the most noise trying to convince us up front. That's exactly why this blueprint still works exactly the same way today as it did 5 centuries ago. The packaging around us has changed completely, but the fundamentals of real, lasting power never actually did. All right, that's the full blueprint. Before you head out, let's lock this in. If this video gave you even one thing to actually apply in your own life, do not skip past this part. Hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need exactly this kind of message. Drop a comment down below and tell us which part hit hardest for you, whether it's the silence, the discipline, or the patience piece, because your comments genuinely shape what we bring you next. Share this with somebody in your life who's grinding in silence right now and needs a reminder that what they're building actually matters, even if nobody's clapping for it yet. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because the Hidden Mind is going to keep bringing you this exact kind of no-fluff, real strategy every single week, straight from history's sharpest minds. And if this content has been genuinely valuable to you, drop a super thanks below. It helps this channel keep growing and keeps this kind of content coming your way instead of the same recycled motivational noise everywhere else. One last thing before you head out, because it's honestly the most important part of everything we just covered. None of these 9 principles work if you only apply them for a week and then quit because you didn't see instant results. That's the trap most people fall into. They hear something like this, get fired up for 2 or 3 days, and then slide right back into their old patterns the second the excitement wears off and real life gets busy again. Don't be that guy. The entire point of this blueprint is that it's slow, it's quiet, and it's built on repetition over time, not on short bursts of motivation that fizzle out by next weekend. Pick one principle from everything we covered today, just one, and commit to actually living it out for the next 30 days straight before you even think about adding a second one. Maybe it's cutting back on how much you talk about your plans before they're real. Maybe it's building that one non-negotiable daily habit nobody else knows about. Maybe it's simply staying composed the next time somebody tries to get a reaction out of you in public. Whatever you choose, give it real time to actually take root, because that's exactly how quiet, disciplined, impossible to replace men are built in real life. Not through one dramatic video or one motivated Monday morning, but through boring, consistent repetition that eventually adds up into something nobody can ignore anymore. Remember this on your way out. The world doesn't remember the loudest man in the room nearly as often as it remembers the one who quietly became impossible to replace. Stay quiet, stay disciplined, stay dangerous. This has been The Hidden Mind, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.